Hi friends, it's Dr. Vatiri again, and we're moving forward with our Dominion Diet lesson. This lesson, we're going to focus in on how to juggle between the categories. Now, it may seem like you're cheating a little bit, but we're not cheating that we're doing something wrong. We're just using how your body works and how your body metabolizes different food sources to work to your benefit. Now, when we think about just the concept of a carbohydrate, for instance, a carbohydrate is anything that has the ability to, when it gets broken down in your body, turns into glucose, which is simple sugar. There's a lot of food products or food sources that fall into carbohydrates. Vegetables are carbohydrates. Apple pie is carbohydrates. Sugar in a candy cane, that's a carbohydrate. Pizza, the dough, carbohydrate. Bread, carbohydrate. Pineapples, carbohydrates. So carbohydrates will come in many forms, from fruits to vegetables to breads to starches to grains. They're all in the carbohydrate family. Now, when we're managing our columns going vertically from top to bottom, our goal is to, in certain categories, meaning the carbohydrate, the C family, we want to stay within our number. So if we're doing the benchmark number of 1200, we don't want to go over 360 calories or 36 points. Now remember, that number, just to do a refresher on getting to that number, is the number that is subtracted from your metabolic rate minus 1200, because we want to try to remove, again, 1200 calories from our diet per day, but without going underneath 1200 calories. If your number is 2000 as a resting metabolic rate, and we subtract 1200, we'll be too low. We'll be at 800. That's too low. We want to go no lower than 1200. And of course, we make up that difference by increasing our exercise level to get to the differential of subtracting 1,200 calories from our daily either intake with food or by increasing our exercise. Now, if we're calculating our carbohydrates and we're adding it up down the column throughout the day, and we reach a point where we're going over our carbohydrates, okay, we can take that additional number and put it over to our fruit category. Okay? Now, you cannot do this every single day on a daily basis. And you cannot do this if you're overindulging on cake and cookies and ice cream. This juggling, or moving from the carbohydrate family to the fruit family to substitute the number of calories, only is to be used if you're going over on low glycemic index, high fiber foods. So for example, if you had some whole grain for breakfast, and you had a whole grain bagel for lunch, and you had a cup of brown rice at dinner, and your number at the end was 46 points or 460 calories, but you only had an apple in the fruit category, you can take that additional number and move it over to the fruit category. Which means if you add up the fruit category and the carbohydrate category, it would come out to, say, 48 points or 480 calories. So if you combine your fruits and your carbohydrates and it's under 480 calories or 48 points, then you're okay for that day. But again, this is not a process that we do every single day, okay? This is a process that we do on the occasion that we go over on healthy foods. Now, if, for example, we go over on non-healthy foods, okay, then what happens is we need to be even more careful, because, for example, if we go over and say we have cake because it's a birthday party, but we still want to keep that as a good day and not cross it off as a day I went off the reservation, okay, understand that from that group of foods, that we have 48 points or 480 calories as a maximum number. Okay, so you don't want to have a piece of cake at 300 calories and then say you did good by having some whole grains and a couple of pieces of fruit. Okay, that becomes a point where we're doing calorie management. And again, this is not supposed to be done every single day. There are programs out there, there are weight loss programs out there that give you points to follow and numbers to follow and calories to count. And it's okay as long as you stay within your numbers. Now, theoretically, you probably will lose some weight because you're just not ingesting that number of calories to go over your metabolic rate in which you start putting pounds on. But we're talking about getting healthy and being healthy from the inside out. So it is the occasion that we over carbohydrate ourselves and move it over to the fruit family. The same thing happens if you're having fruit, for example. Say, for example, you had a cup of pineapples and a banana and maybe a peach or some fruit salad or whatever, and instead of staying at 12 points or 120 calories, you had 24. Now, even though it's fruit, it still gets broken down into glucose. So theoretically, if you're eating other foods that day, you have a possibility of going over that number, that global number, if it's the benchmark 1200 or whatever your number may be. So then you would take that number and say you went, instead of having 120 calories or 12 points, you had 16 points, 160 calories. You can move those 4 points over to the carbohydrate family. So again, when you add them together, you're still under the 48 points. Now again, as always, this is not the typical situation. This is the atypical situation. If, for example, you see though you're doing well, okay, and you say you're one of my patients and you come in and you tell me, say, Doc, listen, I'm not much on the breads. I'm not much on the carbohydrates. I'll have some grains and such. I'd rather have more fruit. I'd rather go with more fruits and vegetables as opposed to the grains. And then that becomes okay, meaning you're not forced to have, breads and pastas and rice. Now, having the whole grains are good for you and healthy for you because of the fiber content. But if you're not getting that and you're eating plenty of vegetables, which of course have plenty of fiber in them, you're not missing the amount of fiber that should be going into your system, both the soluble fiber and the insoluble fiber. You need a certain percentage of both in your system. Now, if you're going to be more partial to having fruits, it's okay, and then you can adjust your categories. Okay, so if you're really enjoying pineapples and you're really enjoying bananas and you're making a smoothie, for example, then that's okay. You can go over your 12 points, but put those extra numbers on your carbohydrate family. So there is an ability to juggle or mix and match to go from one category to the other when it comes to the fruits and the carbohydrates. Now, with the vegetable family, there really isn't much substitution because for the most part, most people rarely go over that number for the vegetables. So even if your benchmark is 120 calories or 12 points, very rarely do I see people come in and have like 160, 180 calories in the vegetable family. It would be nice to see that, unless they're doing just a vegetable fast or a just salads for a day or two, which sometimes I recommend on patients when they sort of slip off a little bit, or they go to a party, or there's a wedding or whatever. Then we take 1 or 2 days where we're just going to do either fruits and vegetables or just vegetables and soups to sort of re-gear our body back into into the program, as opposed to making believe that we went overboard and never recognized it. Again, we don't want to be so diligent just on diet, because remember, the whole purpose of the Genesis Life Wellness Program is to really live that Genesis life, to not only be able to eat right and have it become a habit in your life, but work on other things, making sure that you drink plenty of water and you get your exercise and you have your spine properly balanced and you're able to put your life in perspective when it comes to how to react and interact, so you're not stressed out, causing your body to break itself down from the inside out. Now, in the protein family, it's also a delicate line that you could work with when you're using the proteins and the dairy family. Okay, cheese, milk, those are all in butter. That's all in the dairy family. So if, for example, you're going to go a little over, and there's more of a chance to go over on your dairy than it is on your protein for most people. Okay, now especially if you're a person who loves cheese, and of course there's using some wisdom when we're choosing our cheeses. Again, I mentioned earlier that the feta cheese or the goat cheese may be a little bit of a healthier choice because it's easier for us as human beings to digest. We have somewhat of the enzymes that can break down the proteins in those cheeses. In regular cow milk based cheese, we really don't have the enzymes. So though some people may have a reaction, most people may not have a reaction to the proteins. Some people have reaction to the sugar, to the lactose, but the proteins, they're really not digestible by human beings because we don't have the enzymes. Now, not everybody has a overt reaction, but for the most part, it will definitely put a hampering on your immune system and on your energy level because your body doesn't have the ability to metabolize those proteins correctly. So we want to choose from that perspective. But on the perspective of juggling the proteins with the dairies, we also want to look at it from the perspective of moving our dairy number into the protein family. So say you're at the benchmark number and we have 36 points, 360 calories in the protein family, which of course includes the eggs and nuts and certain beans. That's all in the protein family. That all adds up into the protein family. And for example, if you want to put some extra cheese on something, and you know that, and it's gonna be almost premeditated. Okay, you're not supposed to be surprised when it comes to this. You have 12 points in the dairy, 36 in the protein, and again, similar to how we work the carbohydrates, you can substitute some of the dairy into the protein family. Okay, if you go over on the protein family, and again, the rule of thumb, if it's good protein, if it's going to be with beans, or if it's going to be with almonds, or if it's going to be with some lean meats or fish, and you go over, you could take some of those remaining numbers, and if you didn't go over on your dairy, you can move it over to that number. You don't necessarily have to, write it on your food diary log in that space. Just take an arrow and bring it over. So at least you know what you did that day, that you moved it over. Again, we don't want it to become a daily habit, but in some cases, with some people, it's good to do that, especially if you're not into dairy. I'm not much into dairy, okay? So if you're not that much into dairy, and especially if you're starting to do some real vigorous exercise, so maybe you're up to the level where you're doing the Gen Intensity workout program, it's not a bad idea to increase your protein level from the meat, fish, chicken, beans, nuts category, so you can go over that number. In some cases, I suggest to my patients, you can go over that number anyhow. Lower your carbohydrate number, go up your protein number, especially if you're doing the vigorous exercise. So those are the two main ones that you could sort of juggle in between, staying within the parameters and not doing it on a daily basis, especially when it comes with the rich so-called goody foods, which are not necessarily healthy for you. Okay? Stay tuned for our next lesson.